All right, all right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of Bible and Brekkie. I guess another episode might work, but glad you guys are here with us. Brian, what's up? How you doing?
Yo, I'm doing good, man. That little intro always kind of like pumps me up. I was like, yeah, just chilling, talking, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, and then I'm
Yeah,
like
it's like, oh, I'm ready
nodding
to
my head,
go.
like,
I'm
all
ready
right.
to go. I hear you too. I was kind of like, I was like, oh, dude, okay. The music
Yeah,
really gets you excited.
it's a tough day if you're like drinking caffeine at like 11.
Yeah, you're like already, yeah. Shout out to some mate man here. Shout out to
Yeah, bro.
Brian with the engraved Sebastian Lopez River
Yeah.
Plate.
Shout out to Mercado Cuatro in
Merc-
Paraguay who do all these things that would be crazy expensive here, but are cheap,
Bro,
really
I mean,
cheap
yeah, I
over
was
there.
looking at this. I was like, bro, like, I don't want to drop this on me, but I mean, the detail, right? I mean, someone painted this, right? Handcrafted,
So it's kind of like carved.
but I'm saying, isn't this would be
Oh, the shield. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the shield for River Plate painted on. This is like
That's
either
burnt on there, yeah.
burnt on there, and but I mean, everything here. I mean, the detail. You got little thing here, a little
Yeah,
holder.
and it's not like that weird leather that kind of just chips away over time. It's
Oh, dude, is
it's
this for
actual leather.
the Wombisha right here to hang it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. That's cool.
Yeah, the bombisha gets its little holster.
Little slot right there, a little holster there. Dude, yeah, it's nice. Take it around like a little it's a merce instead of a man purse and carry this around. So
You got it, bro. Just don't bump it too much because it's glass on the inside.
it is?
Yeah, so when you open it up and you look inside, you'll see that it's kind of like this bright, like it's a glass container.
Oh, I
It's
got
made
it.
of like a really like thick glass that keeps the water either really hot or really cold depending on what you're doing.
Good to know. Because I thought it was like the top here looks plastic, but I'm guessing that like you're
Yeah,
saying.
it's plastic on the outside for sure.
Oh, I see. Keeps it
I mean, the only time mine ever broke was when it was like sitting on my desk and it was full of water and someone this
dropped
was
it.
in the dorm back in college and someone came in with their book bag and kind of
No,
turned and
no.
hit it off of the desk. It fell and it's just
Yeah,
it doesn't break into a billion pieces, but it breaks, and once it breaks, the water
yeah,
is just everywhere.
yeah. Because the leather won't contain it necessarily.
Yeah, but they
That's
sell like things to change it out, so I
replacement.
wouldn't worry too much.
That's a sermon illustration, bro. You can't. If the inside breaks, the outside can only do so much.
It still looks good, but it won't serve its
It won't
purpose.
serve its purpose. Hey, that's what I'm gonna take it to church now, just for
There you
that,
go.
just to
Yeah,
teach
man.
people. What are you drinking? Oh, this is just to teach you a lesson. Oh man. Well, we've been going through the book of Hosea. We've had a good time going through chapters 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to cover a couple, maybe 2, maybe 3 chapters. And instead of doing the whole chapter, we're going to do a couple verses that have stuck out a little for us. So we're going to start with just chapter 4. Up until this point, we've had the crazy story of Hosea. Unfortunately, that kind of his role play kind of ends at this point. It's only in the first chapters here where you kind of see Hosea going to marry a prostitute and then going to pay for her again and then saying, hey, you're going to live with me from now on. You're my wife. Like, you don't need to go and do that. And so now we're moving into God's whole thing with his people, right? And then again, as we saw from before, seeing it from the angle of God, where though it may sound like it's very intense and full of judgment. Obviously, the people have broken their covenant and their relationship with God, but he's just hurt, right? He's a hurt God that really wants to bless them and do the best for them. And so he's just calling them out pretty much and saying, hey, look, you've been failing in your end. And these are the things that are happening, right? So chapter 4 and 5 are about that. And in chapter 6, we kind of see a plea from Hosea to return to God. So we'll talk a little bit about those verses. But going in chapter 4, verses 1 to 7, goes like this. Begins, hear the word of the Lord, you Israelites, because the Lord has a charge to bring against you who live in the land, right? So we see this kind of judicial language of like, hey, this is a court case. God has a charge against you, right? There is no faithfulness, no love, no acknowledgement of God in the land. There's only cursing, lying, and murder, stealing, and adultery. It's very interesting, right? Some of the commandments here, right? Lying and murder, stealing, adultery. They break all bounds. All bloodshed follows bloodshed. And because of this, the land dries up and all who live in it waste away. The beasts of the field, the birds in the sky, and the fish in the sea are swept away. But let no one bring a charge. Let no one accuse one another. For your people are like those who bring charges against the priest. You stumble day and night, and the prophets stumble with you. So I will destroy your mother. My people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. But you have rejected knowledge. I also reject you as my priest, because you have ignored the law of your God. I will also ignore your children. The more priests there were, the more they sinned against me. They exchanged the glorious God for something disgraceful. So pretty strong language here from Hosea on behalf of God, and bringing this charge of the living of Israel in the land and how they've been operating. And what's crazy is that it's not just the people themselves that are in trouble, but also the leaders, right? And it's not just the leaders. And, you would think about like those that, the kings and I don't know, monarchs, the leaders
Right.
in the community, but also the priests themselves, right? And the prophets are just as bad as he mentions there, right? The more priests there were, the more they sinned against me. So it seems as though they're in cahoots to really go against God. But Ryan, the one thing that really stuck out to me here in this part was just the beginning, right? As he just compares and paints the picture of Israel. There's no faithfulness, there's no love, no acknowledgement of God in the land. I think something that we have as a church preached for a long time, right? As we looked at the world, there's only cursing, lying, and murder, stealing, and adultery. And what's interesting is that this isn't a picture of the world, but actually of the people of God, right, that are doing this. And what's interesting for me is that verse 3, right, because of all this, because of all their actions, the land dries up and all who live in it waste away. The beasts of the field, the birds in the sky, and the fish in the sea are swept away. Which for me kind of brings me back to Genesis, right, 1 and 2, where God creates, and there's that I didn't look at the Hebrew, but I wonder how much of it is like kind of word for word of how God created, right, the beasts of the field, the birds in the sky, the fish in the sea, and how our actions for and not following God and being evil and being selfish have really not only hurt our relationship with God, hurt our relationship with others, but it's actually played a toll on the world itself, right? And how God, from the beginning told us to be the keepers and the tenders, people that would tend to the world and to the animals, right? And we have, through our actions, caused them to suffer and waste away, which is crazy, right? So the earth is affected by our decisions, and by our, I guess, our lack of action in really protecting the world, which brings to mind. Good morning, Roxy. Good morning. Which brings to mind what we saw. I don't know if Brian, you saw that on the news of like the oil explosion. I think it was outside of Mexico. That just there was like fire coming out, and the water was just on fire. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't see it specifically. Like, I don't really like watching videos where like horrible things happen, but I did hear about it.
Yeah, so it was a crazy. Like, it was just, you're looking at some of these boats are coming around, and there's just, I guess it's the one of the oil places is on fire, and then the oil spills, it's on fire, so the water is burning, right? So they're trying to turn off the water, which people thought it was funny because they're trying to throw water on fire that's on water, but it's interesting. We see that a lot, right? I mean, I was talking to a church member that lives half of the year up north in Oregon, and she says that on last Sunday and Monday, they had a high of 116, 117 in Oregon. This is the north, right? Like next to Canada, I never thought of Oregon.
It's right below Washington State.
Right. Yeah. So obviously, Cali gets hot, but she said it's completely unique and rare for that to happen. And so we were just talking about how just through our actions as humanity, right, pollution and not taking care of our environment has led to the hurting of our world, and you can really see that and feel that in various things. But I thought that was an interesting point there. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, just before we came on, we were having this conversation, right? And you're talking about like the priests and things like that. So,
Mhm.
most Bibles have like a little letters and numbers and stuff that you can go and look at other verses that kind of speak to that. Um, which, if you have the time to do that, go ahead and do it because it's kind of cool. But anyway, what we're reading here, chapter 4, right? And you were just kind of highlighting verse 3 a little bit, right? The land dries up and all in it waste away, kind of thing. But like verse 4, right? But let no one bring a charge, let no one accuse another for your people, or like those who bring charges against a priest. I'm like, what does that even mean? So luckily there's a little W next to my thing, right? And there's a couple of verses there that you can kind of read. And so in Deuteronomy, right, where Moses is kind of like giving the law again to this new generation, brand new generation, had never seen Egypt, had never grown up in Egypt, had
Yeah,
never
yeah.
experienced all those, like, the fullness of the 40 years in the desert, in the
Mhm.
wilderness, right? He's kind of like reciting, all right, this is what the law is, da 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 da. So that's what Deuteronomy is. So in Deuteronomy chapter 17, you have this verse 12, that kind of highlights this a little bit. It says, anyone who shows contempt for the judge or for the priest who stands ministering there to the
Mm.
Lord your God is to be put to death.
Wow.
So you
Yeah.
show contempt for like a priest or a judge. All right, that's it. Like that's reason enough for you to be put to death. And so when you read it again, right, chapter 4, a verse, was it 4? Um, but let no one bring a charge, let no one accuse another, for your people are like those who bring charges against a priest. So it's basically saying you're only bringing charges, one, out of contempt,
Wow.
and two, when you bring up those charges, you know what? You should just be put to death. Like, you're already dead to me. Is essentially what he's
Right,
saying.
right.
Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah. Wow.
and I think of church sometimes, particularly now. Like last Sabbath, we had our worship pastor preach on being a living sacrifice. And part of that was, like, many times we're willing to put other people on the altar and sacrifice them instead
Mhm.
of ourselves,
Woo.
and what we need to do. And
Wow, wow.
so looking at this verse, right, and seeing how a lot of times you had a whole group of people that were just focused on one beat out of contempt, just saying like, hey, no, like, this person, like, I accuse them of this, just because maybe some kind of jealousy or something like that, where they wanted to be above them. And so it was like, oh, I accuse this
Wow.
person,
Wow.
um, instead of looking to themselves and be like, dang, like, I'm guilty as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And so you see a lot of that in Israel. And that's what God is really frustrated with, apparently, is like this sense of contempt, that people feel better than others and are willing to accuse them. Um, you know, I don't know if they're hoping, like, if they accuse them, that they'll go to jail, or they'll be like killed or whatever.
Right.
But people are accusing left and right, just trying
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
put the blame on others. And yeah, it's really bad at this moment in Israel's history.
Yeah, and this is crazy, right? Because it's not just, and I thought that was interesting, right? I guess I'll just eat on that. Talk on that. What you shared about, Deuteronomy, and if you bring a case against the priest, like, you might be guilty of death. But I feel like wasn't there a time when the people, and maybe it was Miriam that brought a case against Moses, right? And then she got leprosy or something. I don't know if you remember that story.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting, right? How, I don't know if I forget what God said in that moment, but yeah, I had that idea there where it stems from what you said, right? And just that, recapping there, it's easier to look at the faults of others than to look at our own. And especially, I don't think we realize, and obviously, I guess we're biased because we do this, but working in a realm directly for God, right? Obviously, we're not priests now. We might be we're a different type of morphation. I don't know if that's the word, but
Hmm.
a different type of work compared to that. But it is it is interesting how God really puts, people that are really just working for Him, not on a pedestal, but to say, you know, kind of protects them, because it's like, hey, look, they go through a lot already as it is. But what's really fascinating here is that simply because you may have that kind of like, hey, be careful, don't mess with these priests, they are still susceptible to falling just as much as the people are. And as we kind of see throughout the Old Testament, my pastor always says this term. He says, as the king goes, so go his people. So as the leader goes, as the priest goes, as the king has gone, as the judge goes, you know, as we see throughout the Old Testament, the people just follow behind. And sometimes, like Aaron, the people influence the leader, and the leader says, all right, whatever the people wants, us do it. Or sometimes it's the people, you know, maybe like King Ahab, that was just really bad, that just leads his people in the wrong direction. So we're seeing, like you said, right, just a crazy time for Hosea, which makes sense then when you look at the first chapters, why God had to be so graphic in trying to call their attention, because it seems right now that they have like no moral compass. There's no like right from wrong type of thing. Like they have to really have this intense graphic image in front of them to be like, whoa, okay, wow, I didn't realize I was that depraved and that bad. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And I guess I should have done a little bit more research on this, but you know, in chapter 1, right,
Yeah.
where you know the word of the Lord came to Hosea, son of I don't know if that's Beeri or Barry, during the reign of Uzziah, all this other stuff, right? I don't really know if Hosea comes from a priestly lineage or if he's just a prophet. Like God just called him out of nowhere to be a
That's a
prophet.
good question. Yeah.
Because it would be interesting, like if basically what God is saying through him is like, listen, try to come at my boy Hosea, and you'll see what happens. You know, but I can't say that because I don't know.
Right. But it does seem like God, you know, God does that at times, you know, like especially people that have stood up for him. Like I think of Jeremiah, right, and Elijah and stuff, and it's like, you know, these people stood up for God in the face that when they thought there was no one else standing up faithfully, and God's like, no, they're gonna, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, you also have prophets like Isaiah, who's like they do everything God tells them to, and then you know
They still, yeah.
I mean, his ending is sad as heck.
Right, and that's what's kind of crazy too. It doesn't always end. No matter if you're faithful, or if you're faithful, doesn't mean it's going to end in all peaches and roses and
Yeah, and
which is
butterflies.
and butterflies, it's rainbows, and yeah. So crazy part here, and so continues there in chapter 4, talking about how they're engaged in prostitution. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, how in the pagan religions, the way that they thought I mean, the idea was that you had to manipulate the gods to bless you and to look favorably on you. And many times that what they would do, because these gods carried, you know, genders and whatnot, like, you know, they had to emulate what or mirror what they wanted them to do. So they would have sex in the temples with prostitutes that would actually be there, in order to like convince the gods when they would see that, to kind of, you know, in another way turn them on, for them to do that as well, knowing that when they had sex, the fruit of that would be maybe rain or a fertile soil, you know, whatever the god is that did that. So a very diluted view of God, where in that religion that you had to convince God.
And a very like man-centered view of God too, because it's like really, I mean, we're married, Seba, and you know, you put something, you know, you try to put something on that makes you look good, right, for your wife. She's not gonna be like all like, oh yeah, okay, let's, you know, let's do this. You know, it takes a lot of time.
There's more.
Whereas
There's
like in
more
all
to
these
it,
other
right?
festivities, everything else that was going on, it was very like sexual, because you know it was all based around men, right? And
Right.
so like men, like you just like look at something, you're already like, all right, you know, like I'm
You're ready.
already like turned
You're ready
on
to
or
go.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? And so with these gods, it's like, all right, if they see us like this, then you know they're gonna get turned on and they're gonna want to give us what we want, because that's for the longest time. I mean, you look at history books, and that's what women kind of had to do in order to get what they needed or what they wanted out of men. And so they'd be like, all right, at least when he's in this state, I can get him to agree to what I need or to what I want.
Yeah.
And so that's the same way that, you know, the gods were treated. It's like, all right, if I get them in this state, then they'll agree to what our need is.
Mhm.
You know, so I mean, it's really, really messed up.
Yeah, it's a sad reality though.
Um,
It's like what they say, right? Women will give sex to have love, and men will give love to have sex. So obviously there's this, and then when you throw that in with like just the false view of God, or not a true selfless desire for the benefit of someone else, you just have a paradigm that favors men in these contexts.
yeah,
And women pay it. Yeah, they just pay with their
and
bodies and
yeah,
their
and time
lives.
again, you see how God is kind of like trying to push hit like people
Hmm.
viewing him that way, like away,
Yeah.
like, yo, I
Yeah.
don't want to be viewed the way that other gods are viewed. I am like completely different, and I am way better
Yeah.
than anything you could ever desire or feel like you need. And
Hmm.
you see it in Jesus too, you know, like Jesus
Yeah.
comes and people are, you know, there's this whole like thing like, oh, did he marry, did he not, did he have kids, did he have sexual relations?
Right. Right. Right.
And as far as like we know, as far as what the Bible says and tells us, no, you know, he did not. And to a
Hmm.
certain extent, it kind of shows like this huge love that he's not seeking for pleasure in
His own
return.
pleasure. That's
He's
good.
pleased
Yeah.
by our like by our, you know,
Yeah.
joy
Yeah.
and our well-being and things like that. So um
That's deep. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think like that Hosea really really shows that, at least in these little
Hmm.
these few verses, that it doesn't really say that per se, but it alludes to it,
In
you
the
know.
context. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. It was just a very bad time, and God is trying to really through them. I guess it's the conundrum that parents have of just like, how do I teach my kids this lesson while punishing them for what they're doing, but redeeming them, but having to teach them that I still love. It's like it's hard. How do you walk that fine line, right? You kind of risk, as we saw, being misunderstood by many people, right? If God comes in too hard and He says, I'm bringing Assyria, I'm bringing Babylon," it's like, how do you do that? And so here He's trying to really awaken their condition.
Hmm.
So yeah, moving on to chapter 5.
Yeah, basically chapter 4 is all about that, you know,
Yeah,
all the bad things that they've done, and just
correct.
this is why I'm bringing this charge on you.
Correct. And then jumping to chapter 5, it's kind of like, hey, okay, this is what's going to happen, since you're continuing in this. And pretty interesting. I wanted just to read this, and then we'll jump down to the verses we're doing, which is 13 to 15. But um, it's kind of interesting here that verse 4, their deeds do not permit them to return to their God. A spirit of prostitution, right, as we've been talking about this, is in their heart, right? And this goes back to even the whole thing that happens with Hosea, where he goes to marry a prostitute that in her heart, as we see later on, as she leaves him again while they're married, um, goes out to be a prostitute again, and they don't acknowledge God. So it's really the condition of the people, right? And so the same, I think, graphic response that we're getting from Hosea and his wife Gomer is the response that God wants us to realize between Israel and him, that it's like, yo, these people are just set on leaving me, right? So really interesting. Spirit of prostitution is in their heart, and that's coming out to the external outward, and they're living like that. But going down to verses 13 to 15, um it
Sorry,
says this.
verse 10.
Oh yeah, verse 10, sorry. um all right. Judah's leaders are like those who move boundary stones, which would be interesting to see the significance of that. These guys are just trying to mess everyone up. I will pour out my wrath on them like a flood of water. Ephraim is oppressed, trampled in judgment, intent on pursuing idols. I am like a moth to Ephraim, like rot to the people of Judah. When Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah his sores, then Ephraim turned to Assyria and sent to the great king for help. But he's not able to cure you, not able to heal your sores. For I will be like a lion to Ephraim, like a great lion to Judah. I will tear them to pieces and go away. I will carry them off with no one to rescue them. Then I will return to my lair until they have borne their guilt and seek my face. In their misery, they will earnestly seek me.
Dang, dude.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to my lair and just wait there until they're ready to repent. Man, that's I mean, obviously strong words, as we saw, right? In um those boundary stones, man.
So Deuteronomy 19, verse
Uh-huh.
14, this is what it says. It says, do not move your neighbor's boundary stone set up by your predecessors in the inheritance you receive in the
Mhm.
land the Lord your God is giving you to possess. So essentially what he's saying is like it's a form of stealing, right? You're stealing the inheritance of someone else. Something that's been
Mm.
passed down from generation to generation. You're taking upon yourself to move those boundaries. It kind of reminds me of like what these colonizers did to Africa.
Yep.
You know, they set up boundaries that were never meant to be there, and that's why. I mean, at least some people attribute some of the problems in the continent of Africa to like these boundaries that were set up
Yeah.
just because, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
man. Yeah. It's crazy. It's kind of, you can kind of see it through history where colonizers in different countries or people groups come and just they're like they put their flag down like, all right, this is our land now. And it's like, wait a minute, you can't just
yeah,
right. And so we're seeing really like a social justice issue here where the people are just acting without respect to other people, without even respect to history and what's accorded
yeah.
to these individuals that has been passed down from generations. I mean, we think about what happened with the pilgrims and the Native Americans, right, that were
Yeah,
here.
exactly. I was just thinking, I was like, I don't know why I went to another continent.
Mhm.
It's seen
It's right here.
here,
Yeah.
in the whole history of the United States, where you had people come in, right, English, French, right, come in and take up certain portions of this country, and it's like, yo, this land's not even yours. Like, why would like
Yeah.
we bought land, right? The Louisiana Purchase, right,
Hmm.
from the French for I
Hmm.
don't know, like from Napoleon, I don't know for how much. And it
Yeah.
wasn't even theirs to sell, you know. And so, like, I think to some extent, like this is kind of what um this book is talking about.
Hmm.
Hosea is like, yo, you take advantage of people, right? And you sell things that don't belong to you, or you
Wow.
move
Wow.
around boundaries that aren't yours, that
Wow.
you have no power over. And so it's crazy because, like,
Mm.
you know, God puts all these things into consideration,
Yeah.
and you would think that at some point judgment will come because of these boundaries being moved.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Dude, that's powerful, man. It's kind of just reminds me of like when I just saw the documentary of oh, what's it called? It's the college entrance uh scandal that happened, right? Where the guy was like forging documents and pictures of people and getting people into like Ivy League schools and prestigious schools and institutions like Yale and Harvard and Stanford. And he was like, doing it through like the back door, and people were paying him thousands of dollars to get their kids in there, and I forgot how I was connecting this actually. But no, but it's
no, I mean, this makes
what?
perfect sense because essentially what he was doing was he was taking up a spot from
Right,
someone who actually
right,
deserved it, or who had
right,
worked their entire life,
right.
or, you know, to get to that place. And he's moving the boundary over and excluding that person from
Mhm.
what would have been theirs.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That was a point, but then the other point too was just in the sense of like where when we start making decisions for other people on behalf of them, and thinking, you kind of see it through history too with when a lot of the reasons why, people that were pro-slavery wanted slaves because they thought that was what was best for African Americans. They're like, black people need slavery because this is when they are their best selves, right? Which is like a ridiculous thing to say, right?
Oh
Who
my God.
can't believe that, just repeating that is like, I can't believe it. But
Yeah.
it's kind of that idea, right? Where you had some of these parents in this scandal that were making decisions for their kids, and some of them didn't even want to go to college. They had, there was another one that had a successful other thing going on through YouTube and other partnerships. And here you're making a decision that hurts other people around, like you said, the chances of other people to get in, but you're also making a decision for other people on behalf of them because you think they know better
Wow.
than them, right? And this is interesting because it's the Judas leaders that are doing this. And I think it's a warning for us as leaders as well to be mindful that, I mean, obviously we have opportunities to make decisions and responsibilities to do that. But when we do that, making sure we're not, just looking at the people that we're over or representing or leading as just people that we can just maneuver and navigate and say, okay, I think this, so really trying to look at what benefits others. I mean, because you continue in those verses, right? It says Ephraim's oppressed and they're intent on pursuing idols and just like this social justice that was needed in this place where they're just doing whatever what lo que le da la gana, right? Whatever they
Yeah,
want,
dude.
we'll take this. We're not going to give them, their inheritance. Oh, this was in your great generational. Oh, okay, whatever. Well, we're going to take it now. It's ours now. And it's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. I'm looking at like well, I think we kind of covered the whole like boundary thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm looking at verse
You
12
milked
now.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I'm like a moth to Ephraim, like a rod to the people of Judah.
Mm,
Um, there's like two ways that you could look at this, right? You could see like, oh yeah, God is like slowly eating away at them or whatever.
mhm.
But another way is like, mo- moths are so annoying, dude.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
they're so annoying. Like if you see a moth once, you're like, oh my god, like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you just want to like smack it away.
They're huge. Yeah.
And yeah, there are things that work slow and they like eat at your belongings, right? At your clothes or
Mm-hmm.
at your house. I don't know, something's rotting or whatever. Um, but they're also like extremely bothersome. Like they're always like it's always there, you know what I'm saying? And so like for God to describe himself like this, he's not just describing himself like, oh, I'm gonna hurt him so bad, like from the inside, everything's gonna crumble. But he's saying like I'm doing so annoyingly. So like that I'm there, that I'm the one
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
doing it.
Like
It's
little
like,
pest. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like it's almost like he's saying like, hey, like I'm here, like stop doing what you're doing, like turn away, like there are other places, right, that don't have moths or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
aren't rotting. Um, and so like in a way, even like the way that he goes about the punishment is like very slow, like just waiting. It's just like, yo, just repent, man. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
repent. And it's
Yeah.
like
Just stop. Yeah.
it's and so he's never let me change that. It's not that he's never. It's like at this point he's saying like I'm not gonna bring destruction upon you like night and day, I'm going to do
Mhm.
it very slowly, giving you as much of a chance
Right.
as
Right.
possible
Right.
for you to turn away from what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's kind of clever, the way that he describes as like, um yes, I'm actively being slow, but I'm also actively being a little annoying, just so
Mm-hmm.
that you are aware and like, hey, this is happening, like what do you need to change,
Right.
you
Right.
know
Right. And this, like, and I think it must be hard, right? Because it seems like anything that God uses, people just don't learn, right? If He brings a whole army to come in and take them and wipe them out, they still don't learn, right? And then He's like, all right, I'm gonna try a slower thing, which is like just slowly be a pest around you, and it's still not, So He's like, man, it's like, what do I do, right? And it's just like just being in God's shoes, I just can't imagine, man. It's a lot to have to bear and carry there, but
yeah.
um,
and
yeah.
and verse 13 is hilarious, like to like
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
God is just like trash talking them. He's like, yeah, you thought this could help you. Um,
I like that. Yeah,
right.
right
Yeah,
here.
right. So it's like, oh, when Ephraim saw sickness and Judah his sores, then Ephraim turned to Assyria and sent to the great king for help, but he's not able to cure you, not able to heal your sores. So it's like
That's
when you
hilarious.
find yourself in trouble and you're like, oh, let me go to, what I think will help or what I
Mhm,
think I might have a little bit of control over. And
mhm.
God's like, nah, bro, like you don't
Yeah,
have control over
yeah.
that.
That's hilarious.
That's not going to heal you. That's not going to cure you.
Mhm,
And I love that he says cure because um, typically when you receive like a cure from something, it takes some time. Like
mhm.
it doesn't seem to be overnight, right? That you're
Yeah,
cured, unless like some miracle happens and like
right, right.
the cancer's gone like that. But typically, like I'm thinking of cancer simply because that's probably like taking over as like the number one disease that
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
fatal to Americans. It's kind of taken over heart disease, which was or has been number one for a
Number
long
1 for a
time.
while. Yeah.
And so when you think of cancer and you think of remission and you think of all these things
Mhm.
that happen after you go through the treatment, it takes a really long time for you to be healed or cured from this cancer. And I think that for the most part, that's kind of how it works with us. We take a series of small decisions that keep growing in our hearts, that just completely take it over. That the cure for that isn't going to be like one worship experience on a Saturday morning or
Right,
Sunday,
right,
whenever
right,
it is
right.
that you
That's
go to
good.
church.
That's good. That's good.
But it's going to take time, and you're not going to get it from just one sermon. You're not going to get it. It's
Yeah.
not an easy fix. And I think
Right.
that many times, especially here in the Old Testament, they thought, oh, it's an easy fix. Like, oh, God's going to judge me. Oh,
Yeah.
well, I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing. So I'm going to go to this king and be like, hey, listen, man, so if these Babylonians come, you're going to protect us. And here's all this money. Here's all these treasures that we take from the temple, that we take from the palace, and we'll give it to you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so they're trying to do their own thing, right? Sorry, that was my dog.
You're
They're
good.
trying to do their own thing, and it's not going to work out for them. And God's already telling them, listen, you're trying to do this, it's not going to work. Stop paying like this tribute to this nation. They're not going to be able to help you.
Right.
And that speaks volumes to us, to me, because yeah, I do like to have control. Like I do like to be able to say, yes, this is what I'm going to do or not do, and what's going to work best for me, without necessarily giving that over to God, right?
Yeah, that's fascinating, right? And just even how the implications it has for us, right? Of just like you're saying, that control idea. And God's like, he can already see it. Like, yo, I can tell what you're gonna do and what you're gonna try to do and how you're gonna do it is not gonna work. So let's just, it's kind of like, it's like you can imagine like a couple talking, right? Let's just cut to the chase and like go. The decision you're making is not gonna work, right? I guess it's maybe kind of like a parent-child thing, right? Where it's like, that's not a smart move. I've been there, done that, right? I've seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, trust me, right? I've seen this thousands of years. It's not the first time I see someone dealing with this. And it's very interesting too, right? Looking at the geopolitical time at that time, right? Where they turn to Assyria, and if they're, if Babylon is a power at that time, which is kind of what happens with the first time Babylon comes to take over, they go to Egypt for help, and then Babylon gets upset, and it's like, what are you doing? And then God will be like, look, I'm taking my protection away. And with that, my knowledge and wisdom and my prophets, and then you're on your own. And this is when they make dumb decisions like this, that Babylon comes in and says, oh, you're trying to go to Egypt for help? I'm going to take Egypt and you, and we're going to exile, right? And so it's like, God's like, man, just if y'all were just to listen to me. And I guess maybe it's how we feel sometimes as pastors or parents feel with their kids, as you see people going through their life, and we're like, man, if you only would just stop and surrender and stop trying to fight in your own armor, or stop trying to be in control, and we kind of feel that, and God feels that just in a corporate level with nations in this country and his people here. And they still continue to be persistent and go against him as much as he's trying to, like, he said, either go fast with like bringing a lot of things to them, or slow, being like a moth and rot. He's like, hey, and then he gets to the point, right? Verse 14, I'm like a lion, and I wonder how much of that is symbolic of Babylon, right? Because we know Babylon is like represented by a lion, right? So this, I don't know if this is like a prophetic idea, like, hey, I'm gonna come and using Babylon, right? I'm gonna allow you to make these dumb decisions that's actually gonna bring Babylon and come and get you. And God's like, hey, I'm taking credit because I could protect you, but I'm not. And so, hey, and I'm going to come and tear you pieces, take you away. I'm going to carry you off. Really, literally what happens with exile when the people are taken to Babylon. And this is where we get the book of Daniel, among other things. And with no one to rescue them, where they're there for years, right? That's Daniel 9. Daniel's still in Babylon, and he's crying because he says, man, I thought our time was done here in exile. I thought we were going to go home. And then he says, I'm going to go to my lair, and I'm just going to chill there until you learn and you seek my face. In their misery, they will earnestly seek me, right? So it's just crazy that God's doing everything he can to really say, I'm trying to save you from literally your own decisions, knowing that what you're trying to do and accomplish, as you said, it's not going to cure you, it's not going to heal you, it's not going to do the things that you want it to do. And if you leave me no choice but to allow this to happen. And it hurts, it hurts when you know what's best for someone, and yet you're seeing them do the opposite. It hurts to see them doing that,
Yeah, for sure. And I think that part of the problem here, like most of our problems, like not most of our problems, but some of our problems aren't meant to be fixed by human hands, you know, and like their problem, like with all these, I guess, inner demons that they had, right,
Mhm.
and these like false gods and whatnot, it wasn't going to be fixed by going to some guy, right? Right, to some king, no matter
Right.
how
Right.
powerful he was or whatever, that wasn't going to fix the issue. And I think that we do look for solutions in places where there aren't any in our state, right? When it comes
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
like sin and depravity and things like that. So, um, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And when I look at this sense of like, oh, the lion, and maybe representing Babylon, like you said, and um, basically the land was left desolate, right?
Mhm.
After that, after Babylon came the second time, um, and there's literally physically no one left to go and rescue or try like some kind of
Right.
weird
Right.
rescue mission for
Not like
those
an extra
taken to
tribe
Babylon.
somewhere. Right. That's like,
There
oh, where'd you
wasn't,
go? Right.
and so you see the mercies of God here, where He
Mm.
says, "Then I will return to my lair until they have borne their guilt and seek my face." When you read the Bible and you go through it and you get to the book of Daniel,
Mhm.
like you brought up, and you read there that Daniel goes to his knees, he's praying, and he's
Mm.
like,
Mm.
"God, I'm sorry for all my people."
Yeah. He identifies.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
bro? One guy,
One guy.
one guy. And so when I read this, and he's like, until they have borne their guilt and seek my face, in their misery they'll earnestly seek me. One guy. Like, was this whole time God waiting at least for one
Just for one
person
person. Right.
to acknowledge like what
That's
has
true. Yeah.
happened?
Wow. Wow.
And he's like being merciful enough to say, like, yo, if at least just one of you, right? And then Daniel comes on the scene, he does so. And that changes everything, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
I feel like many times, like in maybe in my life as well, like um God's not looking for everything about me to change right away. He's just like, yo, just open that one door or that one window,
Yeah. That's good.
or
That's
that
good.
tear down that one wall or take off that one brick, you know and he requires so little
Mm.
in order to give so much.
Yeah, that's good, man. I think of like the first thing when you were saying like one guy, I'm thinking about Abraham when he's praying for like Sodom and Gomorrah because Lot is there, right? His nephew.
Hmm.
And he wants them to survive. And he's like, God, will you relent if there's like 100 people? And God's like, yeah, 70, he keeps bargaining, right? He's like, no, 25, 10, 5. And I guess I don't know if he gets to one person, right?
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't think, but it's just like he's going down the line, and God's like, yeah, I will. I mean, if anybody just turns, I'm gonna stop, because I'm different from the other guys that want pain and punishment and death. I don't thrive on that. I wish that everyone, even he tells that in Ezekiel, that even the evil come to repentance and turn and change. Um, so it is crazy, right? And you think of like, and there's another side of that too, where Daniel, you would consider him someone that was just an innocent bystander in a sense, right? Because at least what we see from his life when he gets to Babylon, because we don't have what happens before that, but he seems to be an upright, just guy, right? That follows God, that stands up for him, and yet in his prayer, he's like, "We've all sinned and fallen short." And it's just a powerful imagery for all of us that hey, no matter, it's easy for us sometimes to be in church and be like, "Oh no, I'm good." I mean, compared to them out there, but he's really identifying with his people and saying, "No, we as a people, as a collective unit, we need you guys because we've all fallen."
Yeah.
So that's powerful. But I like here, I guess here in this chapter, chapter 5, this idea where um, they're carried off and no one is there to rescue them. I think of like the idea goes back to my mind where in the beginning of chapter 4, where it was saying how their decisions and their actions causes the land to grow weary and to fade away. And something as we were talking about the exile when they're taken to Babylon, Second Chronicles 36. I always found this fascinating. Second Chronicles 36 and talking about this. Verse 20 says that he carried into exile to Babylon the remnant, right, who escaped from the sword and they became servants to him and his successors until the kingdom of Persia came to power, right? So it's just like the historical, hey, this is what happened. They were taken to Babylon once the exile happened, and then until they were there until, and then it says in verse 21, the land enjoyed its Sabbath rest. All the time of its desolation it rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. So it's like interesting, right? How like the land now, going to what this was saying, right? Now that they're in exile, the land itself is like having its own Sabbath rest and finally like not being mistreated by the actions and the doings of God's people. So it's an interesting, you know, kind of comparison there, right? Where the people are suffering from exile, the land is like enjoying its time where it's like, whew, man, all right, you know, now we can finally kind of find this literally a Sabbath rest for the land, right? This inanimate object that in chapter 4 we're talking about how all their cursing and lying and murder, stealing and everything, all that was causing the land to dry up and waste away. And how, you know, we fool ourselves in thinking that, man, we are making sometimes our decisions we're affecting our surroundings and literally the land we're on negatively, and sometimes the punishment that we receive is the justice that the land receives or needs.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, the land in itself like gives life to things. It's like if you were, you know, you're married and you decide to have a kid, but you want to have a kid like as soon as your wife gives birth, all right, let's have another kid. All right, it's like there's going to come a point where her body's not going to be able to sustain that.
Her body's like, nah, yeah.
Anymore, you know?
That's true.
And not to say that women are an object or land or anything like that, but what I am getting at is like the land gives life when you plant a seed in it, and you know the plant grows, and dude, you can't be using it all of the time. And it seems like that's what they didn't follow the rules set in the, you know, first book of the Bible, where it says like, hey,
the cycles and stuff.
If you have all this plot, like make sure you're only using part of it because you need the other plot to rest and to keep on resting, and then you take turns, right? And you use the land that way. But you know, if you're planting something and you're reaping a huge benefit, right, from it, you're gonna be like, oh no, I want to plant on all the land.
Right.
And it seems like that's what they were doing, and they did so much to the point where God says, oh, I will dry up your land, and it was just a natural result of their
decision,
their decisions, of their actions. And dude, if you were, you know, a good person of like agriculture, you would know that land needs to rest. Yeah, you can put all the, you know, all the stuff that you want, all the necessary nutrients that your land may need, but at some point it needs to just sit there.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. It's just the idea, like, you know, when profit or gain or, you know, selfish benefit goes on top of other people or the land that God has given us, the animals that God has entrusted us with, then we suffer the consequences. They suffer the consequences, right? But if it's like put in the right order, right? When we look at those Levitical laws, we're like, this is kind of boring. But I mean, the purpose was that, right? You're just saying, right, of just being able to maximize what God has given you and doing it in a healthy way so that all parties involved, right? The land itself, the crops, the animals, the people, everyone can benefit from it. But obviously we live in a world now where it's like whatever can benefit me the most at the expense of others, that's what I want. And that's
everyone can benefit. Like, you don't have to be rich to live well. And I mean, this sounds really socialist. And and at the same time, there's longevity, right? And what you produce. And and like if we take this back to like the Sabbath, right? Which you know, as Adventists, we believe in the Sabbath being Saturday, right? Do we really do this? Because it's like, no, throughout the whole week, we don't do what we should be doing as Christians, right? We don't minister, do any of that stuff. So guess what? On Saturday, we're going to do all the ministry we missed out on. And it becomes just another work day. And so you're reaping on Saturday, just like you're reaping on every other day, just a different job, right? One that you don't get paid for. And that's so good. It's like, bro, you're not keeping the Sabbath. You just say that you're keeping the Sabbath, but that day is filled with as much labor and as much production that you can, you know, produce. as any other day.
Yeah. No, that's good, bro. That's good. And wow. Yeah, we fool ourselves in thinking that if we can just do right on one day, it makes up for all the wrong we've done the other 6 days of the
Just
week.
because you're working for God doesn't mean you're not working.
That's true. That's true. Rethinking everything, yeah. But it's cool because you definitely see that this message for Hosea, though gloomy and dark and weird with the prostitution and Gomer and Hosea, is really relevant to us today, right? When we talk about not just the state of the church and having idols, right? We didn't even really go into that, right? And we saw that in I think a lot of the time. We talked about it a couple of times last year, and talking about Christian nationalism and setting up these leaders as like these idols. We saw the evangelical church as well kind of do that with Trump as their Messiah figure. That's a whole nother conversation. We really didn't touch on that, but here we're just talking about that idea where obviously the leaders can really lead in a terrible way, but the idea of you being able to thinking that you can control your own life, and then that leads you down the wrong path. And then most of the times when we try to control it ourselves, we're hurting others. We're hurting what God has given us and put around us to bless us and to be, I guess, beneficiaries. I don't know, to be able to bless each other, right? We bless the land by how we treat it, and the land blesses us back by the fruit it produces, right? And it's just a mutual relationship. But many times it's just how can I gain more out of this, right? And like we talked earlier, how can I gain more out of the women and the bodies of the women that we have around us? And we saw that in the prostitution in the temples, right, or the land and stuff. So
Right.
relevant to the social issues that we have here. And I know as a church sometimes we're weary of that because it sounds, as you were saying, maybe all the terms that we throw around, right? And we're like, oh, that's
Right.
oh, that's a little socialist, that's a little communist, that's a little Marxist, but really God is concerned with the well-being of every person in the world, right? And not obviously mostly concerned with humans, but also with the animals and with the land. And so really a call for us to really rethink how we live our lives, and not only do church, but how we do and interact with people around us. So powerful words from Hosea here. We'll continue into chapter 6 and some other chapters next week. But before we finish up here, I don't know if you had any last words, Brian, before we move on to our lightning round.
There's just like deep theological components here that most of us aren't really aware of that are happening. So like from Genesis to like Jesus, dies on the cross, you have like and resurrects, right? You have this sense of no, the ruler of this world is like this like prince of darkness, right? This like satanic figure. And you're reading about these things, and you find out that you ought to treat not just your neighbor, but this world, the land, everything that's in it, with a certain kind of respect, because you know who the true ruler of this world is, right? And so when Jesus dies on the cross and resurrects again, he takes back ownership of this world, even though it was never the other guys, but still. And I think that to some extent, Hosea is kind of calling us, or calling Israel at that point, to live that way, to live not only like, okay, you got to take care of your neighbor, but you got to take care of all the things that God has made for you.
Even more. Right. Oh, that's good. And I know it's hard because we don't live in like an agricultural world, at least in our part of the world here, where we have like day-to-day
in Florida. We, maybe you go down to Homestead, they got a lot of farms and stuff.
They got some farmlands and stuff. So we don't live like that with animals and stuff, but it's still how we take care of our environment is very important in the eyes of God too. So much so that in the exile, the land rested, had its own Sabbath rest, so powerful stuff. Awesome. So moving into our lightning round here. First one up. What's the worst injury you've ever had? A broken heart.
I think my left knee has been the worst injury. I probably messed up my ligaments in there some way. To this day is not that well, but I went to a doctor to get the little scans and all that stuff, but I never actually went back to like analyze them or anything like that. So it's happened in college, and ever since, like, it's just been shot. So
you said your knee, right?
Yeah, my left knee has, it was a soccer injury. Just kind of landed with all my weight on it. Felt like this cooling liquid just like
Oh.
it- just spreading through like the inside of my leg. Uh, it was a lot of pain.
Mhm.
I'm not someone who typically cries outside of like having to do like a in-depth like prayer about like God or having to preach something like that's really personal or whatever.
Right, right,
But
right.
outside of that, I typically don't cry.
Yeah,
And this made me cry, dude. It was extremely
that's
painful.
powerful. That's crazy.
Um, couldn't walk really, but for a couple of days. Luckily, it was my left leg, so like my right leg was okay. To go to
Right.
the bathroom and stuff, I could squat with just my right leg.
You're right, right.
But
Do yeah.
it really did a number because you put all your weight on one side of your body, then
Mhm.
your body compensates, and then
Yep, yep, yep.
your
So how
hips
you
end up
walk
like all crooked and just a number of problems. So that
and
I think that was
that's
probably
yeah,
the worst injury I've had.
that's powerful. Yeah, that's one thing that just from my own, seeing my own journey with my own body, but also learning from Chantal, like how one little thing, and I guess that's another sermon, right? One little thing, an injury, really messes up your whole body because everything has to compensate, and then your knees move, your hips, your back, then that affects the other side. So
Yep.
very powerful. But for me, I just hurt my ankle. I don't know if that's my worst one. I think this one's been kind of annoying, but it's only been a week, and it's getting better. It's still kind of swollen. Thankfully, no bone broken or fractured. It's just my ligaments, and I had a sprain. So, but probably the worst was I had a sciatic nerve issue last year or 2 years ago. I was at the gym and I pulled too much, and I pulled my back, and the nerve that just runs from the lower back down the butt, right? It goes either on right or left down
Yeah.
and for me it's on my right side, so it would run down my butt, down like the side of my in between my the IT belt, or IT band, IT belt. And then down to my knee, and it was just like the pain just was horrible. And that thing is like you just got to stretch it and roll it, and then time will heal. And it was
Yeah.
just I couldn't stand for too long. Sitting down would hurt. And that was just it was just an annoying.
That
And
sucks,
that's kind
man.
of yeah, that's kind of the nagging pains that just sucks. That you're like, man, that sucks.
And
Thankfully, I'm good now.
Chantal's favorite side too. It's
Right,
just like
right, just the right
everything.
side. But yeah, that would probably be my worst injury. And it just kind of everything hurts, and you just can't do much. But
Yeah.
awesome. All right, moving on to the predictions we have 3 different finals going on right now. So NBA Finals, Euro Cup is this Sunday, and Copa America is this Saturday night. I guess I'll start with my predictions. Last night, the Suns won, so they're
2 and 0.
2-0. So they've won. They have 2 more games, and they win the championship. Honestly, I'm going with the Suns. Um, I don't know. We'll see. I'm choosing the Suns. It could go to 6 or 7 games. It could also go. They could get swept. I don't know if that would happen, but we'll see what happens. But I'm picking the Suns for winning that Euro Cup. I really want Italy to win. If you saw the last couple of games with England, they're playing in England, so it's kind of they're getting some from our perspective some favorable calls. But I would like to see Italy win again. It's been a while since I guess England also has been a long time since they were
Yeah, England has definitely been a longer time
a longer time.
than
Yeah,
Italy. I mean, Italy won the World Cup in 2006.
that's true. That's true. So it hasn't been that much. And then Copa America, easy. Argentina playing Brazil. Obviously Argentina. It was a crazy game on was it Tuesday between Colombia and the penalties, and so we came out on top. So I'm good. But yeah, I really want Messi to just get his senior club championship, man. I don't think because he needs it for his legacy, but I think people will always hold it against him if he doesn't have it. So yeah, Brian.
Yeah. So NBA, Suns. I think they're gonna take it. Just mathematically. Also, they're not like they don't have a lot of stars on their teams, so
Mm-hmm.
it's like either one of them really, or you can be
Yeah,
like, oh, this one's the underdog. No,
right.
that's
That's
the
true.
underdog. It's basically watching a game, 2 underdogs trying to get the title that they would have never had a chance to if it weren't for like different injuries and things like that
Mm-hmm.
of like bigger teams. So yeah, I guess I'm going for the Suns. The Euro Cup. Nani, my wife, she's going for for Denmark
Yeah.
since the thing
Yeah.
started. And I was like,
Oh,
nah,
it's the beginning.
Denmark's not going to make it. I'm going for Belgium. I want them to win something.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Belgium, lost against Italy. It was probably the best game Italy played.
Mm-hmm.
Italy won 1-0. Belgium had its chances, but whatever. That's
Yeah,
another game.
the golden generation.
I didn't want the Italians to make it this far. I didn't want them to win. I didn't really like their soccer. It wasn't
Yeah.
that like appealing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know. They just seemed like pricks. So I was like, nah. No, I'm messing around. But right now, between Italy and England, you think like, oh, poor English, they haven't won that in a long time, but they're having some kind of arrogant comments around
Mm-hmm.
that team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so not just that, there's like a really bad history between English and Argentines, particularly over
Politically.
the Falkland
Yeah.
Islands
Yeah.
and the war that happened there.
Malvinas.
And so there's bad blood there. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm gonna have to go for the Italians. I do have a little bit of Italian
I was about to say,
in me. So I guess I'll go for the Italians, though they weren't my number one choice. They're probably my last choice, right? My before last choice.
Right before.
England was my last.
Your two bottom choices.
So I guess I'm going for Italy. Honestly, I would like the English to win simply so that, because my next prediction is Argentina. I think Argentina will take the cup on Saturday night. But the reason why I would want England to win is because then you have the FIFA, what's it called? The
Nations Cup,
Confederations Cup, or something like that.
Confederations Cup, yeah.
So that's the champions, right? So the World Cup champion, the Copa America champion, the Euro Cup, the whatever the Asian thing is called, and then the CONCACAF champs, right? I would like to see Argentina beat England.
I see.
So,
yeah, okay. You're like Doctor Strange. It's the end game.
So that's where I'm just like, if England wins, I wouldn't mind too much as long as Argentina wins and makes it to the Confederations Cup to beat them. So
that's the long.
Either way, I win. Either way, England loses.
Right. As long as that happens, yeah.
Yeah. Notice how I said I win, right? But I mean, I'm not even playing. Yeah. But yeah, I'm going for Argentina for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, Argentina.
I think we're gonna win 2-1.
2-1. I think, yeah, and I think I hope we play with urgency. I think with Colombia we didn't come out as like, once we scored that first goal, it was like
that's the way it's been every single match, right? We play really well the first 20 minutes, we score a goal, and then we're just like turned off until like something drastic happens. And we're like, oh crap, like that's right, we're playing. So we get back into it. I don't know, man. Like our team we have several players that have been to finals before. We know how to play this.
Experience, yeah.
The Brazilian side, it has two good players, in my opinion, Neymar and Casemiro. And apart from those two, the rest of the team kind of sucks. Maybe Marquinhos is redeemable, but the rest of the team is just like,
they don't have a lot of...
It's not the best Brazil I've ever seen. So it's definitely, even though it's in Brazil, like,
and they have Ederson, right? They don't have Liverpool's.
They have Alisson's in the bench.
Oh, but Ederson,
yeah. So I mean,
they have well-known players, but like you said, the caliber of it compared to other years or the glory days is
I think just the size of the match, of it being like this huge Clásico from South America, is gonna play a big role in it. A lot of people are talking about the refs and stuff like that. Like, sure, but I mean, if you make a golazo, it's a golazo whether the ref wants to call it or not.
Right. And hopefully it's allowed to play out. And
it'll be a good game. It's gonna be a good game.
I don't know if I can watch it. We have a couple of Brazilians and Portuguese people at church. I don't know if I'll be able to watch it with them. Probably not, because it's.
I'd watch it with them. I don't care.
We'll see. We'll see what happens if I get invited. We'll see if I get invited to.
Yeah, that's true. That's another story.
Yeah, come in with my Argentina stuff. But awesome. All right, and last point here, Loki reaction so far. I haven't seen Wednesdays yet. I know this happens every Wednesday, every Friday, but
All right,
last I,
so it's
last
okay
I saw
because
was
on
when
Wednesday
Loki
I
ends up.
fell
Oh,
asleep. So,
okay. Oh, so that talks about that shows.
no, it was really good. It's just I was really tired, and
Okay.
so um, Nani was like, "I don't know how you fell asleep. It's the most action-packed one. Like a bunch of stuff happens," and I was like, "Oh, wow, I missed one heck of an episode." So I
Right, right.
haven't seen the last episode yet, but so
Okay.
far it's been pretty good. It's funny,
It's been
man.
good. It's funny, yeah. There's a lot of twists and turns, especially in the penultimo, the second to last one, of just going into just like a multiverse and seeing different Lokis. One of the funniest thing was the gator that had the headset, and so someone on Twitter on TikTok was showing how, like, this is the Loki from here, and this is the Florida Loki, and I just died, man. So
That makes perfect sense. Yeah,
it does. So
we
it's
do
been
have a
yeah,
lot of gators here.
it's been interesting, man. Seeing, like, we kind of talked about it before, right? Just that the idea of just is everything determined? Is it predetermined beforehand, and then people, God just kind of steps in to make sure everything goes. Now it seems as though we're kind of revealing, like, hey, this is people are just trying to control it, but it's not really like that, right? So
Who's in charge, man?
who's really in charge and what's going on, right? So that's kind of interesting. And then the idea that of control again, of just
It plays with this like deep sense of like identity. Like if the time if the time of my if my life is controlled by like something else, like there's some kind of like timeline and I don't align to it, like how does that affect my identity? Was I just born just for this?
Oh, that's
You know,
good. That's good. That's
which
good.
a lot of Argentina fans would argue that the only reason this player Ngoze exists is just to make that goal in the final, and then nothing became of him. Like,
Bro, that's so true, man. He literally was born to derail
he wasn't
Argentina.
that big of a player at all. And then after scoring that goal, it's not like they ever celebrated him or anything like that. Like,
It was just that's it. That was
it's
it.
just like fell off the face of the earth, and it's just like,
Bro, that's so true, man. I was actually replaying that in my mind the other day when I was thinking about, like, how close Argentina has been. That's the World Cup, and then you have a couple of Copa Americas with Chile, but
yeah.
man,
Listen, man, we've been to quite a bit of finals, man, and we
Yeah.
just got unlucky. Same
That's
thing
it,
with
man.
the last World Cup. We had probably like the worst team
And we still,
building ever, and
we got
bro,
beat by
we
the
pretty much
champions.
almost beat France. Like, in my opinion, France got lucky as hell.
Yeah.
Like that goal that Pavard made, he never made ever again. Like,
And
it
same
was
thing,
just,
bro. He's not the player like Götze, right? Obviously, I mean, he's still obviously playing and stuff with
he's
the
still
selection.
he's still a high quality player, but it's just like
he's never
you're
gonna
never
make
making a
that
goal
shot
like that.
again. Yeah, that's a shot that you're like,
Bro, you didn't even practice those kinds
you
of
don't.
shots.
That's a shot. Yeah, exactly. That's a total luck shot where you're like, oh, let me hit it off in the air right now, and it's
Yeah,
that was a beautiful goal. But yeah, it's one of those, like, okay, that's just not it. Yeah,
it is what it is.
there's that luck involved in that. But awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great weekend.